It was a quiet Friday evening, the kind that feels stretched between calm and emptiness. The room was dimly lit, only a small lamp glowing in the corner. I had no plans, no company, just music playing softly and the city murmuring outside my window. My best friend Adil had promised to stop by later. We hadn't hung out properly in weeks. I was looking forward to some laughter, something to break the stillness that had been following me all week. When the knock came, it was lighter than usual. I opened the door, expecting Adil's familiar grin, but there was someone else standing beside him. Adil stepped in first, his voice full of energy as always. "Hey, bro. I brought a friend along. Hope you don't mind." The boy behind him smiled, a calm, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes but still managed to feel warm. "This is Ryan," Adil said. "We met at the gym a few weeks ago." Ryan nodded slightly. "Nice to meet you," he said in a soft tone. Something about the way he spoke, steady, careful, made me pause. His presence was quiet, but it filled the space somehow. I gestured for them to come in, masking the small spark of curiosity that had already flickered inside me. That we settled in the living room. Adil talked endlessly, his voice bouncing off the walls, while Ryan listened with a gentle smile. I found myself glancing at him more often than I should have. There was something unspoken in the way he moved, thoughtful, graceful. Not loud, not trying to impress. Just there, quietly magnetic. That we had tea and played a few songs from Adil's playlist. The evening began to soften, laughter breaking the initial formality. Ryan joined in occasionally, his laugh low and genuine. He wasn't the kind to dominate a conversation, but whenever he did speak, it felt like the whole room leaned closer to listen. At one point, Adil left to answer a call in the hallway. It wasn't unusual, he was always busy with something, but the sudden quiet he left behind felt different this time. Ryan and I sat across from each other, both unsure whether to speak or let the silence breathe. "Your place is really peaceful," Ryan said finally, looking around. "Feels like you live inside a song." I laughed softly. "Maybe because I play too much music." He smiled. "No. I think it's because you like peace." Something in that observation hit closer than I expected. Maybe it was the way he said it, like he could see something in me I didn't usually show. Our eyes met for just a second too long, and I looked away first. The moment felt small, but it stayed in the air like a pulse. Adil came back, breaking the spell. "Guys, I need to run downstairs for a bit," he said, grabbing his phone and keys. "Give me 10 minutes. Before I could answer, he was already out the door. The sound of it closing left a faint echo behind. Then, just silence. Ryan leaned back on the couch, his hands folded loosely. "He's always this full of energy, huh?" he said with a quiet chuckle. "Always," I replied. "Sometimes I wonder where he gets it from." We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt easy again. But the air had changed, subtly, invisibly. The kind of change you don't notice until you feel it in your heartbeat. Ryan's gaze lingered, not bold, not shy, just aware. I found myself studying the shape of the moment, the weight of his calmness. There was no reason for my chest to feel tight, yet it did. Maybe it was the closeness, or maybe it was the quiet understanding that something unspoken had started between us. Time slowed. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder than usual. A car passed outside, its headlights flashing briefly across his face. That I wanted to say something, anything, to dissolve the tension, but words wouldn't come. It wasn't an awkward silence anymore, it was something else. Something alive. And then, without either of us moving, it was clear that whatever happened next would not be by accident. When Adil left, the room didn't feel empty. It felt charged. The silence between us deepened, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was the kind of silence that carried its own language, the kind where every breath feels like a question, and every glance feels like an answer you're not ready to hear. Ryan looked around the room as if searching for something to say, but his eyes kept finding mine instead. "I like your playlist," he said finally, nodding toward the small speaker on the table. "You have good taste." I smiled faintly. "Music's my escape," I said. It helps when life feels a little too loud. He nodded slowly. I get that. His tone shifted, softer now. Sometimes silence says more than people ever could. The line hung in the air between us, like something fragile but powerful. I didn't know why, but I felt like he understood me, not through words, but through the spaces between them. A breeze from the window moved the curtain, brushing cool air into the room. Ryan leaned back on the couch, his expression thoughtful. You and Adil, you're close. Yeah, I said. He's like a brother to me. Been through everything together. That's rare, he murmured. Having someone you can really trust. Something in his voice sounded wistful, almost sad. I studied him for a moment, his stillness, his quiet depth. There was a loneliness there that matched something in me. It wasn't attraction at first that drew me in, it was recognition that he looked at me, his eyes gentle. Do you ever feel like you're surrounded by people, but still, completely alone? The question found a home inside me before I could stop it. All the time, I said quietly. Even when I'm laughing, sometimes it feels like I'm just pretending. He nodded, like he understood that too well. Pretending gets exhausting, he whispered. For a while, we just sat there, two people who hadn't planned to share anything, now tangled in an invisible thread of understanding. When he smiled again, it wasn't polite this time. It was softer, more real. You're easy to talk to, he said. That I looked away. So are you. There was another pause. Longer this time. The kind that makes your heart race because you know something's changing but you can't name it yet. That he reached for the mug on the table, his fingers brushing against mine by accident, or maybe not. The touch was brief but electric. My breath caught, and I pulled my hand back, pretending not to notice. But I did. Every nerve noticed. Ryan's eyes met mine again. He didn't say sorry. He didn't need to. In that instant, guilt crept into the edges of my mind, sharp and quiet. Adil's laughter echoed somewhere in my memory, reminding me who wasn't supposed to be a part of this moment. But the feeling that replaced the guilt was stronger. It was warmth, comfort, and something dangerously close to longing. He leaned forward slightly. You seem guarded, he said softly. Like you carry more than you show. His words found a place I didn't want touched. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to answer. Maybe, I said finally. Maybe I just stopped expecting people to notice. Well, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I noticed. Something in me gave way then, not fully, but enough. Enough to blur the line between right and wrong, between friendship and something more complicated. We sat closer now, though neither of us remembered moving. The clock ticked, and each second felt louder than the one before. You ever feel like something's meant to happen, he said slowly, even if it shouldn't? I hesitated. Yes, I said. But I try not to let it. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Sometimes trying isn't enough. There was no grand gesture, no sudden movement. Just two people sitting too close, breathing the same air, holding too much inside. It wasn't about desire anymore, it was about connection, raw, human, forbidden, but deeply real. It was about being seen in a way I hadn't been in a long time, and in that moment, something shifted, quietly but permanently. I didn't plan to feel it. He didn't plan to cause it. But somehow, we both knew the line had already been crossed. When Adil's footsteps echoed from the hallway minutes later, we didn't speak. We didn't need to, because what had happened between us wasn't something that needed words, it was something we both felt in silence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't reckless, it was just real, and that made it dangerous. The sound of the door opening broke the silence like a wave crashing over still water. Adil walked in, smiling, unaware of the shift that had taken place in his absence. His laughter filled the room again, bright and careless, while Ryan and I sat there, still, quiet, pretending to breathe normally. Sorry, guys, Adil said, setting down his phone. That took longer than I thought. You two getting along? Yeah, I said quickly. We were just talking. Ryan nodded, his expression calm, perfectly unreadable. If there was any trace of what had just happened, the tension, the closeness, the quiet exchange, he had buried it well. And I tried to do the same. That we talked a little longer. The conversation drifted from random jokes to plans for the weekend. But I wasn't really listening. My mind was still replaying moments that couldn't be undone, a glance, a touch, a silence too heavy to ignore. When they finally left, the room fell back into quiet, but this time, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt haunted. That I sat there for a long time after they were gone, the lamp still glowing softly in the corner. Everything looked the same couch, the same teacups, the same air, but it all felt changed somehow. Like a secret had settled into the walls. Guilt has a strange way of moving through you. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, until it fills every empty space you thought you had under control. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face, not the smile, but the look in his eyes before Adil walked in. That look carried too many things at once: connection, apology, and something almost like sorrow. The next morning, Adil texted, "Hey, thanks for having us last night. Ryan really liked you, said you're easy to talk to." I stared at the message for a long time before replying with something simple. "Glad to hear that. He seems like a good guy." It was all I could say, because how do you put into words something you're already trying to forget? Days passed. Adil and I met a few times, but something had changed, not for him, but for me. The trust, the comfort, the lightness of our friendship, all felt heavier now. I smiled, I joked, I played my part, but deep down, I knew I'd crossed an invisible line that couldn't be uncrossed. Ryan and I didn't speak again. Not in person, not through messages. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe that was punishment, but sometimes, at night, I'd replay that silence between us, the one before Adil came back, and wonder if he thought about it too. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was something deeper, something that made me question who I was when no one was looking. One evening, about a week later, I saw Ryan again by coincidence. It was outside a cafe, just as the sun was setting. Adil was inside, ordering drinks, unaware that his two friends had locked eyes for the first time since that night. Ryan smiled faintly. "Hey." I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Hey." Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us spoke more than that one word. But in that single glance, a whole conversation lived, about regret, about connection, about everything that should have stayed unspoken. When Adil came back, Ryan looked away first, and that was the last time I saw him. Weeks later, life went on as if nothing had happened. The world didn't fall apart. Adil was still my friend. Everything looked normal from the outside, but inside, something in me had changed permanently. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from hatred or impulse. Sometimes it comes from loneliness disguised as need, from a moment of being seen when you least expect it. That I learned that love, attraction, and guilt can live in the same heart, fighting quietly until one of them wins, and in my case, guilt won, but not before leaving behind something tender, something unforgettable that I never told Adil. There was nothing to confess that could fix it anyway. Some truths live better in silence. Every time I think about that night, it's not the act I remember, it's the feeling. The strange mix of warmth and regret, of being close to someone I shouldn't have been, of realizing how fragile loyalty can be when the heart decides to wander. That we never spoke about it again, but sometimes, when I sit alone in that same quiet room, I still hear the echo of that silence, the one that started when Adil closed the door behind him. And even now, after everything, I can't tell if that silence feels like a wound, or a memory I'll never truly let go.